Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com in association with Bet Victor. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by WhoScored's very own Ben, and we've got Jonathan Wilson with us again, as always. Jonathan, I will come to you first. First off, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Good, very good, thank you. Yeah, enjoyable week, a lot going on in the football world. So yeah, I'm good, thanks. Ben, you okay?
Yeah, well, good, thank you. Just busy. No, football doesn't stop, does it?
Smashing the retro wear as usual on this podcast. We'll start with the key weekend points. And Jonathan, Marcus Rashford's form in the goals, in form, had a great World Cup as well. The times that we did see him, he's just having a sensational season, isn't he? After a couple of real misfiring seasons.
Yeah, which just shows what impact bringing in a player who really affects the dynamic of a team and the dressing room has. That
all down to Ronaldo.
Well, I think a lot of it is, yeah. That when Solskjaer's team played well, it was because they were very effective on the counter with that array of quick attacking players that they had. And Rashford was key to that, and he revelled in that. And then you get Ronaldo turns up. They have to completely change their approach because they've got essentially a static point, so they can't play in that fluid counter-attacking way, which I think was a pretty limited way to play. If you want to be in the top four, you want to be challenging for titles. I think it's a useful attribute to have, but it clearly presents problems against teams who sit deep against you and defend well. So you think of, for instance, the Europa League final against Villarreal, where they just didn't look like breaking Villarreal down. So United under Solskjaer, their away form was relatively better than their home form, and their form against top sides was better than their form against mid-table sides, and that was why. But at least they had one thing they were good at, which once Ronaldo turned up, they weren't good at anything. And I think also Ronaldo's presence in the dressing room, just the enormous mass of his celebrity, means that everything revolves around him. And that, I think, makes things very, very difficult. There were all kinds of stories about him being disruptive in training, about him, I think probably through good intentions, undermining the coach, sort of saying, all these pressing drills don't really work. We don't need this. Training should be fun. And I think that can, especially something like Rashford, who's from the area, who's come through at the club, he must feel some great affinity to the club. I think they must feel pretty disillusioned by that. And so when Ronaldo's gone and that pressure's no longer there, tactically they're a lot better this season. I mean, they're better anyway under Ten Hag than they were under Solskjaer. But essentially that great weight has been lifted, and Rashford he's not the only one, but Rashford is probably the most obvious example of somebody who's really reveling in a new environment.
Do you think if Sancho got himself fit, that he would start to revel? Because we haven't seen anywhere near his best since he came over from the Bundesliga. He's a good player.
That's a really interesting question. I hope so. There's no reason from a footballing sense why not. But there obviously are issues with his fitness. And I mean, he's been dropped recently for some internal disciplinary thing, which, as far as I'm aware, has never been entirely explained. So, I mean, that might be something. Yeah, Rashford was disciplined for turning up late for a meeting. It might be something as simple as that. It might be something a bit more serious. We just don't know. But Sancho, clearly, we've seen enough from him. He's clearly a very, very talented player, and hopefully he can rediscover that, and he'll follow the Rashford path rather than maybe the Dele Alli path.
Yeah, and Ben, I think you predicted Brighton to beat Liverpool last week, which wasn't. I think maybe I did actually. As well, maybe it's me that got the score right. We'll find out at some point. But Brighton absolutely flying, and the caveat I've got from this is Brighton are obviously absolutely flying, took Liverpool apart, dominated possession, were ruthless in front of goal, which we don't always associate Brighton with. But do you think obviously Graham Potter has not been going well at Chelsea? I think it's just a case of maybe Graham Potter wasn't that good and Brighton are just good.
I don't think it's that Potter isn't that good. Last season, you saw them kind of improve. It was his third season there, and they started to really show his kind of blueprint it was effective all across the pitch. They just couldn't score. That was the issue. They've always underperformed in their XG. But De Zerbi's come in and he's just completely changed the attack. I mean, his first game was a 3-3 draw against Liverpool. He had Pascal Gross, Trossard, and I can't remember the third attacker up there. But this time he's got Ferguson, Mitoma, and Solly March. And
on fire, Solly March.
Yeah, informed player. I think he's the Premier League's informed player actually at the moment. So March for England. Yeah, he's revamped that attack, and they've also got that really solid midfield base with Caicedo and McAllister, and Lallana's in there. He's not obviously the most creative, but he does put in the hard work behind the forwards that allows that front three to thrive. So I think it's more that De Zerbi has sort of tinkered with that front line. Potter was still good. It was just they couldn't find the back of the net. And I mean, few could have predicted that Evan Ferguson will come in and do as well as he has done. So it's just, I think just a change in personnel has really benefited them.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you're from the northeast. You'll be very proud of what Newcastle are doing at the moment, won't you?
Well, sorry, before we get onto silly little things like that, I think what's really interesting and what's happened after De Zerbi's replaced Potter, and I think occasionally you see it not just in football, in all sports, that you have a manager or a captain. So I think you see this with the England cricket team when Michael Vaughan replaced Nasser Hussain as captain. I think you see this with the Ajax of the early 70s when Stefan Kovac replaced Rinus Michels, that you have a leader who makes you very hard to beat, who gets the structures right, who makes you very organised. But then to move to the next stage, you need somebody who can allow that to flourish, who can sort of take the handbrake off slightly, release the reins. Which is what Kovac did at Ajax. It's what Michael Vaughan did with England. And I think it's what De Zerbi's done with Brighton. That I'm not sure how much further Brighton could have gone under Potter. Maybe, one of the great things with Potter through his career is how he's adapted and evolved. So maybe he would have adapted and evolved and become a more effective attacking manager. And it's early days yet with De Zerbi. It could still go wrong. But it does appear to be following that path of you do all the careful husbandry first, but then the actual flowering of the plant, you need a different approach. And I think for an individual manager to change is quite difficult. And it's very difficult for the board to say to a manager, yeah, you've taken us as far as you can. We're bringing somebody better now. Or sorry, not somebody better. Somebody who's ready for this stage of development now. Because obviously you stick with the bloke who's taken you from being a championship club to being a mid-table Premier League club. It would be mad not to stick with him and to have a loyalty to him. But maybe to be a team who challenges for Europe, you do need that slightly more expressive, slightly looser approach. I think there is a danger to that, in that once the plant has flowered, once it's come into fruit, the fruit begins to rot. And there might be 2 years of glory for Brighton, and then it all withers, which is what happened with Ajax, and it's what happened to an extent with the England cricket team. But I do wonder if that process is what we're seeing at Brighton. And yes, Newcastle are doing well.
I thought we might gloss over that section.
No, they are doing really well.
They are.
Like they defensively, the thing that was always my big doubt about Eddie Howe as a manager, and he was clearly a very gifted manager. From his days at Bournemouth, it was obvious he took them from fourth flight to top flight. But defensively in the top flight, they weren't great. They let in an average of 66 goals a season. And that didn't really change over his 5 years in the Premier League with Bournemouth. And so I think it's reasonable to have kind of questioned that. But Newcastle have the best defensive record in the Premier League. And partly that's to do with personnel. I think Sven Botman's been brilliant this season. I think they've the only game, is it one game out of 18 he's played and they've lost, which was against Sheffield Wednesday when they had a largely, a much changed side. I think he's made Fabian Schär look a much better player than he did previously, or even than he did at the World Cup. I mean, he was shocking in that 6-1 defeat against Portugal. Trippier's had a great season, both defensively and getting forward, and with his set play delivery. I think that midfield, which may have to change if Guimaraes, if his ankle does keep him out for any protracted period, but that three with Guimaraes flanked by Longstaff and Joe Willock has been incredibly effective. With Joelinton having gone through his sort of midfield phase, which seems to have made him a better player, now back in the forward line, but doing a lot of defensive work up there as well. I think the structure of that works really well, protects the back four really well. I think the Arsenal game was really revealing with that Odegaard's pass completion dropped from 80-odd% to 60-odd% for that game because of the pressure they're putting on him, because of the way they close down the passing lanes. And I think Willock particularly is very, very good at that, which maybe is something that's quite hard for the stats to pick out. But the impact he has on the opponents rather than necessarily the interception of the tackles he's making. Just his positional sense, I think, is very, very good. So all of that is hugely positive and hugely impressive. And alongside that, Eddie Howe seems to have developed this cynicism that Newcastle have the second lowest ball in play stats this season. Only Leeds have a ball in play less often. And I think we've seen them, the Liverpool game when Liverpool finally got the winner in the 9th minute of injury time or whatever it was. Mikel Arteta obviously got very worked up in the Arsenal game. But even you think back to the 0-0 draw away at Brighton, do you think it was the 3rd game of the season or 4th game of the season?
Yeah,
maybe?
a few draws at the start of the season.
Well, when Newcastle got battered, basically, but drew 0-0. And one of the reasons for that was they managed to slow the game down and break it up. And they're very effective at that.
Yeah, well done, Newcastle. Another late winner for them at the weekend. We're going to look now at Manchester City against Tottenham, which is Thursday night. And Ben, Haaland dropped off a little bit recently, not in the sensational form he was in at the start of the season. Obviously, Harry Kane will be playing against the team he could have joined 12 to 18 months ago. Do you think City would be a more complete team with Kane rather than Haaland? I don't think they score as many goals, but do you think they'd be a more complete team with Harry Kane?
I think they probably would. Kane obviously kind of plays that number 9, number 10 role. He drops deeper, and that allows Son and Kulusevski or Richarlison to kind of make the runs inside from the flanks. At City, Haaland remains relatively central. You don't get much work of him off the ball, which I think Guardiola, he doesn't. He wants all of his players sort of playing in the same system, playing in the same way. He wants complete control, but he doesn't get that with Haaland because that's not the type of striker Haaland is. You put the ball in front of goal on a platform, he'll hit the back of the net, and Guardiola just doesn't like that. He wants the control, and I think he would have had greater control with Kane there, dropping deeper, allowing the wingers, Mahrez, Silva, Grealish or Foden to cut inside. And, I feel like there would have been a more complete team. Of course, the counter argument is that Kane would have dropped deep, would have then clogged up the space. De Bruyne would have then occupied, and he would have lost that creative side of De Bruyne. But, City would have had greater control, you feel, if they had Kane up front rather than Haaland.
You just mentioned Kane dropping deep and Son running on there, Ben. Jonathan, what on earth has happened to Son? He's got a great record against City. He's got 7 goals in all competitions against them. His only defeat was 4-3 in the Champions League, where Spurs progressed anyway because of the away goals rule. But Son has just fallen off a cliff this season. He had probably his best season he's ever had in the Premier League last time round. Come back this season. Not only is he not really in the goals, but he doesn't feel like he's doing the things off the ball that he was good at in the past either. Or is it just that Spurs aren't cohesive? I don't know. I'm hoping you're going to tell me.
Yeah, I think it's both, isn't it? It's his form has dropped off for whatever reason. I think it's maybe something that football culture should be more accepting of and sympathetic towards, that players have fluctuations of form, and just because a player's had a bad 6 months doesn't mean he's a terrible player, and just because a player's had a good 6 months doesn't mean he's a brilliant player. But he's got 4 goals and 2 assists so far this season, roughly the halfway point, as opposed to 23 and 7 in the whole of last season. And actually, on that point, this idea that City wouldn't have scored as many goals with Kane rather than Haaland. Last season, they scored 99 goals over the season. This season, they got 46 and 18. So, it depends how many they score, obviously, against Tottenham on Thursday night. But unless they get 3 or 4 there, then they're actually on course to get fewer goals this season, despite having Haaland. So I think having one big goal scoring forward can be deceptive. And in terms of that point of him not joining in the sort of the midfield play, not dropping deep as Kane would, or as Gabriel Jesus has in the past, or Phil Foden, who's been played as a false 9 or whatever, it was very obvious. I think it was when the score was 1-0 to City on Saturday, and there was a player down with an injury, so it was a break in play, and Guardiola must have been 3 or 4 yards on the pitch, screaming at Haaland and sort of doing that gesture, as in drop deeper, get deeper than your wingers. And Haaland was sort of looking at him, like a teenager when his dad tells him to clean his room, and eventually just turned his back on him. And Guardiola was absolutely screaming at him. So I think there is a potential bit of tension there between them, that Haaland just wants to score goals. He's quite happy having 15, 20 touches a game. Guardiola, I think, is starting to think he needs a bit more. And the comparison there is with that game last season when City won 2-0, but were totally in control. That was a 2-0 going on 6 or 7-0. And I think the lowest number of touches by any City player in that game was 76. Holland had 19 on Saturday. And so that's a huge drop-off. That for City to try and control games in the way they used to, they're sort of having to do it with 10 and a quarter players rather than 11. And that obviously is much, much harder.
Yeah, and Haaland just wants to score goals, Ben. Tottenham just want to concede them. What on earth is going on with Spurs' defence? As that ball went across the goal at the weekend, I feel like I just knew Lloris was going to do something, and it would end up in the back of the net, and that's exactly what happened. Romero wasn't good. Dyer looks all over the place. Since he got called up for England, everyone was praising his form and his rejuvenation. He's been absolutely awful. Conte in the past has had defenders at Juve who are very solid. Some of the big defensive names that we've known and loved over the years: Bazzaghi, Bonucci, Chiellini. Conte must look at his defence at the moment and be absolutely bewildered, and in particular the goalkeeper, because I do think the goalkeeper has been a problem for a while.
Yeah, I mean, when Lloris was handing that new 2.5-year deal 12 months ago, it was a bit of a reprieve because it sort of eased the pressure on Tottenham to find that long-term replacement at the end of that season. But fast forward 12 months and it's kind of back in the same position, really. Tottenham do need that long-term successor to Lloris. I think they missed the trick by not going for Mike Maignan when he left Lille for AC Milan. He's clearly going to be that long-term successor to Lloris in the France national team. But Lloris is just starting to show his age. I mean, he was superb at the World Cup. He made that absolutely incredible save in the game against Morocco, where he took the overhead kick, I can't remember who it was by, onto the post. And that was kind of prime Lloris. He's a wonderful shot stopper, questionable on the ball, but he still was, he looked every bit the world-class goalkeeper that he has been in the past. But he comes back to Tottenham and suddenly he's gone from first choice to looking a really rusty second choice. And when that ball crossed over the line from Saka's cross, I know it took a deflection, but it was very minor, and you feel like a goalkeeper of Lloris's reflexes should have done better with that cross. And you think this is just the norm now for Lloris, and it's the norm now for Tottenham's defence. And they've just been so incredibly shaky recently that Conte must just be scratching his head at how to actually work this defence out.
Jonathan, does pressure do funny things to people? I'm just thinking of Everton for a second. Whoever they sign, they seem to crumble under the pressure. Even like a strong characters like Tarkowski and Cody, they look like they're playing with this is not a phrase at all, with a camel on their back. That isn't a phrase. With the weight of the world on their shoulders. With Spurs and Lloris, do you think that because the Spurs fans are very antsy at the moment, they're almost anticipating the mistake, that's making it worse for him playing in front of them?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think, there's never one simple cause. That's just not how the world is. So I think absolutely the lack of confidence in the environment, the antsiness, to use your word, I think that negatively affects everybody's form. It's bound to. I think there is something specific going on with Lloris, and it probably is an age thing. I mean, what that reminded me of, that sort of. The opening goal, the own goal in the derby, where he obviously anticipates to an extent the cross, starts to move for it, then gets a deflection, so the ball's slightly nearer his body than he's expecting, and he ends up shoveling it in off the inside of his wrist, wrist onto the chest and in. And his look of bewilderment, the way he looked startled, I seem to be talking about Michael Vaughan a lot today, but it reminded me a bit of Michael Vaughan towards the end of his career when he kept on getting bowled by balls that just sort of nip back into him. And he'd do this thing of sort of opening his eyes wide and gesturing as if the ball had kept a bit low. But it hadn't. It just, his reflexes just weren't quite as quick as they had been. And I wonder if, in his early mid-30s, whether his reflexes aren't just quite as sharp as they were, if to use the phrase used in cricket, his eyes have started to go. It might not be that, but that was what that looked like to me. And then I think there's a structural issue there at Tottenham that I think is affecting everybody. And this is why form can suddenly spiral one way or the other. That when the structure starts to break down, everybody starts to play a bit worse, everybody's confidence starts to go, and that makes the structures worse because people aren't doing their jobs properly. They're trying to second guess other people. And you look at that first half on Sunday, and there were 3 occasions when Arsenal players I mean, it was the Odegaard long-range shot that Lloris made a quite good save from. There's the Odegaard long-range shot that went in. There was the Partey volley that hit the post. And you can say, okay, that volley came from a corner that wasn't quite clear, so maybe that's a slightly different case. But the amount of time they had to measure long-range shots, that just shouldn't be happening. Something's gone wrong there with the midfield. So you looked at the Odegaard goal, and you saw Højbjerg and Sarr both got drawn to the ball. And you sort of think, well, that's not in itself disastrous. But there should be some sort of way of protecting yourself against that. And what you then need, obviously, is one of the back three to step out. And none of them did. So Odegaard had all the time in the world to turn onto that ball, advance 2 or 3 paces, measure his shot, and ping it in the bottom corner. And he had a sighter 10 minutes earlier from exactly the same sort of thing. So, yeah, it's partly, I think with Lloris, I think it's partly, maybe an issue of age and reflexes going, maybe an issue of confidence in the general antsy atmosphere, but also an issue of structure that opposing players had been given time 20, 25 yards out to measure shots.
You like talking about Michael Vaughan? I like making up phrases like camel on the back. We've all got our things, Jonathan. We've all got our things that we do. Let's move on to the combined 11s then, Jonathan. City team as usual?
Yep.
It might be. I mean, to be honest, Ben, it wouldn't surprise me if the Who Scored team was the City team either.
Yeah, this is where it gets controversial. Tottenham actually dominate the combined 11.
What? Let's cancel the podcast. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. I worked out the combined 11. I sent it across to colleagues, and they were like, "That's going to go very well." Are
you in charge of the algorithm as a Spurs fan here? I can't understand how this can work.
If I was in charge of the algorithm, Tottenham wouldn't be anywhere near it. Believe me. On current form, definitely not. So Tottenham have 6 players.
Right there. Is that on current form?
Okay, and just in general as well. That's true. Yeah, in general, there'll be no Tottenham players near it. Probably Kane up front with Haaland, but other than that. Anyway, we've got them in a 4-3-1-2, so it's very sort of central midfield heavy again, excluding injured or suspended players. We've got Lloris in goal, Cancelo at right back, centre-back partnership of Ruben Dias and Eric Dyer, and Perisic at left back. Midfield 3 of Højbjerg, Rodrigo and Bentancur. De Bruyne did miss training on Tuesday, but he's not confirmed, ruled out, so more of a doubt. So we conclude him in the number 10 role behind Haaland and Kane.
I mean, I don't even know where to begin with that. How is that the team? I was half expecting Emerson Royale to pop up at one point the way the team was going. Jonathan, talk to me. Help me.
I've got nothing to do with the algorithm.
I know.
I mean, all that's about me understand. I think I can't. I think Bentancur is a really good footballer, and I think Tottenham are really missing him. I mean, that's not the question that you asked, but that is a thing that I think is true.
He was in the team, wasn't he? So that you would put him in. He's
a doubt, isn't he? I don't think he's definitely out for Thursday, but
he's a doubt. I know he missed the North London derby, but I think he's in contention to play against City, so I've stuck him in there.
And Perisic, I guess, has had a good season, but because of I think so. I mean, his age obviously means he can't play wing back every game. But I think he's a really good crossover ball. I like Perisic a lot as a player. I mean, he's not better than Cancelo playing at left back. I mean, Cancelo at right back I've got problems with as well. I don't think Cancelo's anywhere near as good on the right. But anyway. I mean, there's problems everywhere on the pitch, Jonathan. I mean, you'd lost me at... I don't like the formation either. I don't like the 4-3-1-2 is too narrow.
You'd lost me at number 1, Hugo Lloris. In all honesty,
well,
and then suddenly Eric Dyer's lining up at the back as well. Which if
it's based over the season, Dyer was good until the World Cup.
Wasn't he? Again, I'm not sure on Eric Dyer, but personally, that's just personal opinion. I'm not sure of him. I think in a back three, he's okay. You put him as 1 or 2 centre backs, I think you're asking for trouble. But I don't even know what to do here. Let's just move on to let's move on to the predictions. Jonathan, score prediction, please.
2-0 to City.
I'm going to go 3-1 to City. Ben,
3-1 to City as well.
3-1 to City. Right, let's try and get some sense back into the podcast. Let's talk to Sam from Bet Victor. I am all over the place here. Delighted to welcome Sam from Bet Victor. Sam, how are you?
Really good. Thank you very much. And looking forward to another cracking round of Premier League action. Yeah,
good weekend last weekend. A lot of big games. There was a lot of big results as well. Pretty similar this weekend, actually. There's some tasty ties. Talk to me about Manchester City against Tottenham, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a great little treat for us to have towards the end of the week. City 1-3 to get back to winning ways after the Derby Blues that they suffered. 4-1 the draw, and Spurs potentially a massive 15-2 if you think they'll bounce back from their North London derby. Poor show. In terms of the game itself, I've just been having a quick check through the bet builder that you guys have put together for it, and I quite like this one. I think this is a pretty strong effort. You go for Harry Kane to score any time. You've got Romero card. Yep, that ticks the box for me. I love a little card bet, and he's always on my shortlist. I've got Bernardo Silva to pick up a card. Yep, can see that. I think this is going to be a tightly contested one. And then Haaland, who has been a little bit, dare I say, the Manchester derby, a little bit anonymous, but he's never going to be missing for long, is he? 2 shots. We're boosting that from 46-1 to 50-1, and I'm sure there's some particular science behind it that you guys will explain shortly as to why you think that's good value.
Yeah, that does sound very decent. I can tell you that the reason Haaland did nothing in the Manchester derby was because I triple captained him on fantasy football. Ben, please talk us through the science. There's one I slightly disagree with, but I'll come to that after you've ran through it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I triple captained Haaland too, so another reason for the jinx. But we've got him to have 2+ shots, and the reason being he's averaging the 3rd most shots per game in the Premier League this season, 4.1. Harry Kane, anytime, he's actually the top scoring player away from home in the Premier League this season. He scored 8 times on the road. Romero is committing more fouls per Premier League game than any other centre-back this season with 1.5.
He'd only been booked 3 times. I couldn't believe it when that flashed up on the screen. He'd only got 3 bookings this season when they played at the weekend.
I think all at home as well, so just keeps it clean on the road. And finally, Bernardo Silva to be shown a card. He's been booked in 2 of his last 3 home league appearances.
Yeah, that's a slight one that I would say is a little bit risky because you never know whether he'll start or not, do you? That's the simple thing with Pep Roulette. You don't know who's going to line up in that Manchester City midfield. But got to say, 50-1, was it?
Yep, boosted to 50-1. That's
very generous from Bet Victor. Sam, tell us about Liverpool against Chelsea, please.
Yeah, what a game this is. I mean, it's not quite the clash it used to be. You think back to those Champions League nights that these two used to have against each other and those big clashes through the years. There's plenty of history between these two. Liverpool 5-6 to get back to winning ways after suffering what was, I think, a fair to say, a humbling defeat to Brighton on the weekend. 13-5 the draw. And Chelsea, who got back to winning ways, stuttering, but still back to winning ways against my Crystal Palace. 3-1 for the win. Now, the 2 bet builders we're talking about today, I've got to say, this one interests me just a shade more. And we'll go through the selections that you guys have picked out. So we've got Andrew Robertson to have an assist. He's in my fantasy team. I love him. I think he's a brilliant provider. Can definitely get stuck in. And if Trent wasn't there, people would give him more plaudits. That's my argument. But we'll talk about that another day. We've got Nunes to have 4 shots. We know how he seems to be getting into the right places, but just not being able to get the goals. But I definitely think against this Chelsea side, he should have some fun. We've got Mason Mount to have 2 shots. Seems to be a real key part of Potter's team and gets plenty of opportunities and from dead ball situations. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And then we've got the draw, which is 13-5 as an individual price. And combining those 4 legs together that you guys have picked out, 40-1, we've boosted that too from 37-1. So, yeah, I just think of the 2 we put together, I'm leaning towards this Liverpool-Chelsea one.
Interesting, because I feel more leaning towards the first one that we did. So it's interesting that you say that. Ben, why have we put this together in the battle for the Europa Conference League?
So we've got Mason Mount to have 2 shots. He's had 2 shots in 3 of his last 4 league games for Chelsea. The match has actually ended in a draw in the last 4 meetings between the 2 sides. Darwin Núñez is averaging the joint most shots per game in the Premier League this season with 4.3. And Andrew Robertson, he only has 5 assists this season, but 3 of those have come in his last 3 home appearances.
Interesting. Yeah, two good bets, to be fair, and relatively long odds as well, I would say. I think they're probably both worth a flutter, Sam.
Yeah, I'd hope so. And like I say, last weekend was tough for bet. I had a little flick through the figures. We had a couple of big price sort of combos that people managed to put together, but it was tough for the bet builders out there last time round. I think this week we could be in for a little bit of a stuffing. We're due a couple of big scores and a few carded games. So keep your eyes peeled. As ever, we'd encourage people to gamble responsibly. Just because there's loads of football and doesn't mean we need to get carried away. Enjoy all the action though, guys, and the rest of the show.
Thanks very much to Sam there. Right, we're going to look at Liverpool against Chelsea now. And Jonathan, I don't know whether you know, I've been plastering it all over social media, hoping you'll validate me. I've been doing the transfer shows for Sky, and we talk about players going to all these clubs all day. And then I just sit there and think, Well, Chelsea are going to sign them anyway. What on earth are they doing in the transfer market?
Okay, I mean, I don't. I'm not saying this will work. I think it's an enormous gamble, but I think their logic is they're in quite a healthy position in terms of FFP because before Bowley took over, their transfer spending wasn't huge, and they had a couple of years where they made quite a good profit on transfer dealings. So I think they were in a decent position to start with FFP, and I think they've seen that by giving long contracts, you can amortise the fee over 7 years or 8.5 years. So in the case of Mudryk, 85 million over 8.5 years, it's 10 million a year. So that's much more manageable in terms of FFP. So they're signing a lot of young players on long contracts, and the idea is get your spending done now, and you won't have to spend much in the future. Now, I don't know anything about American sports as to whether that's a viable way of doing things in US sports. I can see
the contracts
how
are shorter in American sports. They're bigger, like in terms of financials, but I think they might be short, especially in the NBA. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know anything about it, so I don't know if that's an idea that Bowley's brought in from his baseball franchise. From in other businesses, I can see a logic in make your investment now, maybe make a loss now, and the assumption is that investment will pay off in the future. And I can see it makes some sense that you rather than wasting time by trying to balance the books now, you kind of have a big hit and sort of assume that your assets will appreciate, or that they'll lead to better results, which will bring in more revenue. I think in football that's a huge risk because I just don't think assets have the same consistency of value in football that they do in other spheres. I think they've got a huge. I mean, there's that story in the Mirror that they're possibly looking into renting out Wembley for 5 years while they do up Stamford Bridge, which is a huge investment. Clearly, having said all of that, the signing young players, the development of Stamford Bridge, I can see that's quite an exciting project. I can see why you look 4 or 5 years down the line. It may be that it looks very, very good by then. The problem is that at the minute they're 10th in the league, and you're sort of thinking, well, I think it's incredibly difficult already for them to get in the Champions League. If they're only in the Europa League next season, Europa League revenues are 23% of Champions League revenues. So that you're taking a massive hit there. If they're not even in the Europa League, if they're in the Conference League, it's 11%. Maybe they don't even make that. And so if you lose those revenues, and balancing the books becomes that much harder. So I sort of part of me quite admires the gamble of the big spending now on young players. Another part of me sort of thinks, well, if this is going to work, surely somebody would have done it before. And the bigger part of me thinks that Todd Bowley doesn't understand football at all. Nothing he's ever said has made me think he understands football. I remember the first game he went to Stamford Bridge was a 2-2 draw against Wolves, and his celebrations of a goal that anybody who'd ever watched football before would have at least had a doubt in their mind that might be offside. And he celebrated for a good 5 minutes before he noticed it was offside. So you're sort of thinking, has this guy actually watched the sport before? The fact that Chelsea's recruitment policy seems to be based on who do the other big clubs want? Right, we'll get him, rather than actually finding their own talents. And there's almost a part of me thinks, so if it does work, it's bad for football anyway, because what you want is clubs to do what Brighton have done. I mean, Brighton's starting 11 last weekend cost 30 odd million, 35 million, something like that. Whereas they've just gone and spent 2.5 times that on getting Mudryk from Shakhtar, who I think he's got a dozen goals and he's 22. I mean, that's a worry. I mean, look, I think he's a great player. What I've seen of him, he looks brilliant. How is he not scoring in the Ukrainian League? What's going on there? If he's not scoring in the Ukrainian League, is he going to score in the Premier League? I don't know. The leap from the Ukrainian League to the Premier League it's a big leap. It's not impossible. Fernandinho did it. Was very, very good. But I'd have concerns. I have concerns. I don't know why I put that in the conditional.
Many concerns.
I will tell you in the indicative. I have concerns.
Yeah, big concerns from Jonathan Wilson here. I mean, I'm kind of counteracting my point a little bit because obviously Arsenal tried to sign Mudryk, but even what Arsenal are doing is good for football, I would say, because they haven't spent an absolute fortune. After they've developed players, they've signed young players, they're trying to go in a certain direction. They haven't signed young players for the kind of crazy money that Chelsea's signing people for. I mean, Ben, prime example with Chelsea at the moment is Quickfire looked like he was going to Manchester City all summer. Chelsea then swoop in and decide to sign him for what was an absolutely astronomical and ridiculous fee. And at the moment, Lewis Hall is playing ahead of him. So the third choice left back is now ahead of Cucurella at Chelsea.
Part of that's obviously going to be down to form. Cucurella hasn't been anywhere near as good as he was with Brighton. But it also could be that Potter's sort of stamping his authority on the squad. I mean, Chelsea are a squad that does need an authoritative figure to kind of weed out the bad eggs, so to speak. I mean, using a lot of cliche terms there, but Cucurella could have easily come in, been a Potter favourite, and Potter just stuck by him. But he's seen he's out of form, and he's put a teenage midfielder in at left back ahead of him, and Hall hasn't been that bad either. So it remains to be seen when Cucurella get back in. But as you say, City missed out on him. Brighton sort of shut the door on any negotiation with City, and then Chelsea just decides to spend big on him instead. And it's been a very big waste of money so far.
I mean, Lewis Hall, by the way, is the oldest looking teenager I've ever seen in my life. He looks older than me. I'm 37. I swear Lewis Hall looks older than me. I can't believe he's an academy prospect. He looks like a seasoned pro playing Sunday League, Lewis Hall, like in the over 30s league. He looks so old. That's my opinion. Hopefully Lewis Hall does not watch or listen to the podcast.
I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, he's unlikely.
I saw his debut. I saw him again. He played. I think his debut was against Chesterfield in the Cup last year, and I was one of those games where I thought he looked a very good player then, and then forgot about him for about a year, like everybody else. But that was, I sort of got my choice of the third round games, and being lazy, I thought, I'll go to the one I can walk to from my flat. Nice, easy 5-1, I think it was, to Chelsea. But the two things out of that were Chesterfield got their goal, and it was all very nice. And you sort of thought, maybe they are improving, and they might be able to mount a bid for promotion back into the league. And part of it was, actually, Lewis Hall looks a decent player, and maybe Chelsea Academy's doing a good job.
Well, we'll see.
And then he vanished. But yeah,
back. He's back now. Still time for that to happen. Jonathan, let's talk a little bit about Liverpool. Got bossed by Brighton. Midfield. I mean, they've got problems everywhere. I think they've missed the most big chances in the Premier League. I think they've created the most big chances. Only Man City have created more than them in the Premier League, but they've only scored 16 of 60, I think it was, I saw yesterday. So that's a problem. Defensively, especially without Van Dijk, that's a problem. But midfield is where it just all feels like it's not knitting the team together. It's not protecting the back four. It's not aiding the forward players either, that Liverpool midfield. And it's been pretty reliable over the years as well. They want to sign Jude Bellingham. I think that much is pretty clear in the summer. I don't think they'll sign anyone to rectify this problem in January because they've spent money on Gakpo, which I'm still a little bit confused about, but that's a story for another day. But if they want Jude Bellingham, they need to be in the Champions League. And at the moment, they are not going to be in the Champions League.
Yeah. I do wonder if Chelsea playing Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League. I do wonder if Todd Bowley might be getting in some Dortmund execs ears in February.
They're not going to be in it either.
Yeah, but that's why Bowley can kind of offer absurd sums of money to be delivered in 12 years' time or whatever.
That'll be a deal.
So, I mean, Chelsea seem willing to outbid anybody for anybody. So, but I can't at the minute. I can't see why Bellingham would want to go to Liverpool. Yeah, that feels like Liverpool were pretty much this bad in the COVID season, and they came back, and last season were excellent. I think you can't assume that this poor run of form is necessarily the end. But I think it might be the end for Klopp. I think it's sort of, it's 50-50 whether he's still there beginning of next season. I don't think he'll be sacked, but I think he might. The thing that struck me after the Brighton game was normally he's a really bad loser, and he's always finding somebody to blame for it. And here he was almost gracious, and I think a gracious Klopp is a really worrying sign. He just seemed tired. So that would concern me if for people who think Klopp. You want Klopp to continue, but you're right. The midfield, it's just not doing its job. It's just not. I think it's partly, it's aging, and it does seem to be creaking.
Combined age of 92, Jonathan, at the weekend for being Santiago.
But it's also, I think, left a bit exposed by that forward line that I don't think presses as well as Liverpool forward lines of the past have. I think I don't know. I mean, I'd need to look into the stats for this, but my gut feeling is Salah doesn't do as much work as he used to. I think he's actually been in pretty poor form for a year since he came back from the Cup of Nations. I think Darwin Nunez, who has tremendous energy, I'm not sure is necessarily focused in the best way. And I think they really miss Firmino. Or they missed good Firmino, because good Firmino was a brilliant leader of the press. He was incredibly intelligent at leading the press. And without that, I think that forward line, it just sort of, and again, it's very, very hard, from the outside to say this. I'd love to know what the internal club stats say about this. But my impression is that forward line is not pressing as efficiently as they used to, and that leaves the midfield a bit exposed. It could be the other way around, that the midfield isn't backing up the forward line, so the forward line looks a bit haywire. It could easily be both. And then that exposes the back four, and those two fullbacks. They need protection because of the way they push forward. And I think Van Dijk's form this season has not been as good. But again, is that him, or is that because he's being a bit exposed? So that I think is the issue with pressing teams, that when one thing starts to go awry, it has a huge knock-on effect, and the whole thing then very quickly falls apart. So the difference between being exceptionally good and pretty poor is not. It doesn't take much to go wrong to slip from one state to the other. Everything has to be absolutely on it to be near that level. It's not like you can drop off 5%. If you drop off, it'll be 25%.
Similar happened with Spurs. I mean, Liverpool obviously lost the Champions League final. They ended up with not as many trophies as they thought they would at the end of last season. Lost that Champions League final, and then they've come back this season, not been the same. So I felt like when Spurs lost that Champions League final, I felt like they came back and they weren't the same. And they were,
although I mean, their form had started to deteriorate in the league, it was sort of slightly masked by the Champions League form. But yeah, I agree that it's a similar process of a hard pressing team. One thing starts to falter. Maybe collectively after the disappointment of the Champions League final, there's a slight loss of hunger. There's a difficulty picking yourself up to go again, and yeah, that exacerbates those problems.
Right, Ben. Let's have a look at the combined 11. Chelsea-Liverpool combined 11. Let's see how many Spurs players have made the team.
It's full of Spurs players, all 11.
Eric Dyer, Lloris.
Naturally, of course. We got 4-3-3. I have cheated a bit, but I'll come to that in a bit. Obviously, excluding injured and suspended players. So it's remarkable that any Chelsea player actually makes it given their lengthy absentee list. We've got Kepa in goal, Trent Alexander-Arnold right back, Thiago Silva and Koulibaly at centre back, and then Robinson at left back. Midfield three of Thiago, Fabinho and Mason Mount. And up front, you got Salah on the right, Nunez through the middle, and then I've put Kai Havertz on the left, but he has started one league game on the left this season, so that's why I cheated and put him in.
Just flip Havertz and Nunez. Play Nunez from the left.
Nunez, according to us, hasn't started a game on the left this season, so
he has for Uruguay though.
You can do it. I think in the front three it doesn't matter as much, but
it's a very, very mobile front three. We'll go with that.
There's a few players there that again I would question. Jonathan, what have you come up with?
Well, Koulibaly's the one who stands out. I mean, I guess it's picking from a really bad lot, but Thiago Silva's been really good this season.
Yeah,
every other centre back in both of those sides has been dreadful.
That's fair. To be fair, that is fair.
I mean, I'd almost be tempted to Badiashile because I thought he looked all right on Sunday. I mean, it's a big call on one game, but given the alternative,
could have used his form in Monaco, couldn't we, to have got him in the team? Perhaps.
Yeah.
Would he have got in the team? Probably. I mean, he must have done.
Probably, yeah, given there's every other centre back is rubbish. So,
yeah, that's the problem with picking these teams. Jonathan, what did you do?
It's so hard because there's so many players out. It's incredibly difficult to pick a team. So it's not dissimilar. But I had Badiashile over Koulibaly. I had Alisson in goal. What was he midfield?
Thiago,
Fabinho, and Mount.
Yeah, I think I had Henderson, Zakaria, and Mount. I mean, Henderson basically just because he's from Sunderland. I don't know if I mentioned that before.
Captain.
And Zakaria gives you a bit of. I suppose he's injured again, isn't he? So that's the problem. Everybody's out. So you're just left with picking the people who are not injured.
Yeah, it's right off this section. It's completely right off. Combined 11s today. No good who scored. Come back next time. Do better. What are we going for score predictions for this one then? Ben, I will come to you first this time.
I think it'll be 2-2 on this one.
Jonathan?
Well, all 4 games between them last season were draws. And so I sort of think that can't continue. So I've gone 2-1 Liverpool, but with a massive question mark in my heart.
Same as me. I've got Liverpool to win 2-1 as well. They won last night in the FA Cup. Obviously, we're recording on Wednesday. Right then, Arsenal against Manchester United. Manchester United are playing tonight. As I say, we're recording on a Wednesday, so we're going to look a little bit more at Arsenal. Absolutely flying, going to win the league by the looks of things. Is there an element of luck involved in it, Jonathan? Because the rivals have dropped off. But then if you look at Arsenal's form, it's exceptional, even if there was someone up there challenging with them. At this stage of the season, to be on the points they're on is exceptional. Yeah,
47 points from 18 games. You project that over season, 99 points. So other teams don't have to drop off much to be 10 points behind him.
Fair.
I'd be amazed if they got 99 points, but I think Arteta was saying he thought they need more than 90, which I think is absolutely guaranteed that they'll need more than 90.
Do you think even this season?
Oh, well, yeah, maybe not this season, but I certainly think if they're getting 87, 88, they're giving other teams a chance that they shouldn't be giving them. Yeah, I mean, I think if they get 93 points to win the league, 92, I think it starts to become questionable because I think City could put a run together. Well, how many points are City on before I make an absolute?
I was thinking 85 might be enough.
City on 39. Assume they beat Tottenham, puts them on 42. So they then they're on course for 84 points. Can they win 2 more games the second half of the season to get 90? Yes, definitely they can, because they've had 6 games this season where they've dropped points. So yeah, let's. I'm going to say 93 will win the league for Arsenal.
Got to play each other as well. I think I'll play each other twice, haven't they? These two.
Guys played each other twice, yeah, which I think might count against Arsenal that because of the death of the Queen, they hadn't played that Europa League game against PSV, and then the rearrangement of that game meant they didn't get to play City when they were on a high, and City just lost to Brentford maybe, or they just dropped points anyway. They were on a there's a slight doubt about them. I mean, it may be that City and United and Newcastle can't continue the form of the first half of the season. But I think if you're on target for 99 points, you can't say you've been lucky. And to an extent, you're putting pressure on those other teams by maintaining that form.
Yeah, no one would have expected Arsenal to be this good. Pep Guardiola would be fuming. He'd have never thought that Arsenal would be this good this season. He might have thought Liverpool, perhaps, with battles they've had over the years. But for Arsenal to be where they are at this point, Arteta and the players and everyone at Arsenal deserve so much credit. But here's the transfer window, Ben. So Arsenal fans will obviously want signings. They've missed out on Mudryk. They're potentially looking at players like Ferran Torres, I think, to come in and come in the front three, cover all 3 positions. But it's that central midfield role. I watched Thomas Partey and Xhaka against Tottenham. They're so key to what they do. Partey's one-touch passing is absolutely immense. That doesn't get talked about enough. He keeps the ball moving for Arsenal. It's a massive part of what they do. And Xhaka's obviously that huge leader in there as well. If they lose one of them, there's nothing beneath them to come in that's going to come in and do anywhere near the same job.
Completely agree. I mean, according on WhoScored ratings, 3 of their top 6 rated players are Ødegaard, Partey, and Xhaka. In Ødegaard, they've got that. They've got Fabio Vieira to come in, stepping into midfield to kind of cover that attacking role that he provides from midfield. But Vieira is not the same level as Ødegaard, who's just been unbelievable this season.
Arguably player of the year, Ødegaard at the moment across the whole league.
Definitely up there. You lose Partey, El Nenny's not the same caliber as player. You lose Xhaka, and Lokonga's not the same same standard as Xhaka. If they lose Ødegaard, they will probably be okay because they have that solid defensive foundation with Partey and Xhaka to a lesser extent this season. But if you lose one of Xhaka or Partey in the sort of coming weeks, then it throws a spanner in the works for their midfield. You can see why they're being linked with Declan Rice. He can kind of cover both of those roles, and it could just be that they've lost Felix and Mudryk to Chelsea, and Arsenal, Edu's basically taking that personally and thinking, well, actually, I'm going to go steal Declan Rice from you instead then.
Good, but I'd like to say that move, in all fairness. Declan Rice for Arsenal is a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, he can cover both those, that Xhaka role and that Partey role if need be. But if they lose one of those 2 players, what happens then? Partey was injured towards the end of last season. The top 4 bid got derailed and they end up losing that to Tottenham. They lose Partey again this season. What what's to say they'll drop off completely and allow City back into the title race?
Yeah, he'd be an absolutely huge miss. I do think maybe slightly they can cover off Xhaka because their defence is pretty well set. Arsenal, they've got cover in every position there. They could perhaps play Tierney and move Zinchenko to play the Xhaka role. Maybe I think that might work, but it's Partey who in there is irreplaceable. El Neni and Lokonga are not going to be able to do what Partey does.
And Partey missed the game at Old Trafford, which is the only game Arsenal lost this season.
Yeah, there we go. The proof's in the pudding, isn't it, Jonathan?
Casemiro also didn't play that game, which is because that slightly weird thing where they didn't pick him for a month.
Yeah, when he first came in.
Yeah,
they should have picked him. It's
well, I mean, maybe he needed that month to acclimatise because he can't argue with his form since. But
no, brilliant.
It looks weird now.
Yeah. I mean,
also keep going, McTominay. Really? Have you seen this as a bloke?
Yeah, McTominay's not nowhere near it at the moment, is he? No, I don't think he's barely even coming on at the moment. McTominay. Talking of players playing in weird positions and whatnot, and weird things happening. Luke Shaw now, Jonathan, seems to be a left centre back for Manchester United. Yeah. Now, watching him over the years, I'd have never said that he could play a left centre back, especially in a two centre back system.
Yeah, I could have imagined it in a three. Absolutely, yeah. I think a lot of modern fullbacks can play on the outside of a three.
Yeah, agree completely.
But yeah, I was a big shock, but it's worked. I think he's played 4 games at centre back. They've won them all. They've only let in 2 goals, and one of those was that weird goal that Everton scored against them in the cup, where it sort of bobbled between De Gea's leg and the post about 15 times before popping out for Cody. So look, it's worked, which I think is maybe indicative of the fact that a lot of modern defending is more about positioning than about physical strength.
Yeah.
Which I guess feeds into the conversation that we were having about Martinez at the beginning of the season. Is he big enough to play in the Premier League? And obviously it can cause problems at set plays particularly, but I think in general play, positional centre is much more important. And the fact that United was so good in keeping Haaland quiet last week. I mean, I think Haaland had was it 1 shot in the game, I think, or possibly 1 on target.
If he did, I don't remember it.
But he was as quiet as I've seen him in the Premier League, and that again it's enormous credit to Ten Hag that he's seen that potential in Shaw and he's picked him to do it, and Shaw's done exceptionally well.
Yeah, you'd imagine Martinez would come back in at some point and Luke Shaw will go back to his natural position. But as a feeling, I think it's it's not great for Harry Maguire or Lindelof in all fairness, but I think it is that building from the back, having that left-footed centre back. He does put a lot of credence on that. Eric Ten Hag, so having Luke Shaw there at the moment, I think that's one of the main reasons why he's doing it. Let's have our score predictions for this one then, and I will go first this time. I'm going to have to start taking some risks because I'm having a rotten season in the predictions. I'm going to go 2-1 to Manchester United. Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. And Ben?
2-1 to Arsenal.
2-1 to Arsenal. All different there. Differentials going on in the predictions league. We're going to finish, as always, with the just a minute section. So we are going to avoid the City and Spurs matches because obviously they're playing a game before we do our predictions, and the same with Palace and Manchester United. Oh no, we've already done Manchester United. We're going to avoid Palace as well because they're playing in the week against Manchester United as well. I can see Jonathan's confusion on how
we're doing Palace. I'm doing Palace Newcastle.
Oh, are we?
Yeah.
Well, here we go. I'm not going to say anything. We're just going to go straight. We're just going to go straight into it. Jonathan, you have the honour of starting with Southampton against Villa.
Yeah, so Southampton, bottom of the table still, but they have won the last 3 games, albeit one of those in the Carabao Cup, one of them in the FA Cup. And that win in the Carabao Cup obviously was that incredibly impressive win against Manchester City, which should have given them confidence and does appear to have given them confidence. But I think this is a major test for the Nathan Jones resurgence, because Villa have been much better under Emery. In the league, they've played 6, won 4, drawn 1, lost 1. That game they lost was the game against Liverpool on Boxing Day when they played pretty well and maybe a bit unlucky to lose. I think one of the things Emery's done really well, I think defensively they look a lot better, but I think not picking Coutinho has really helped. We're starting to see the best of Leon Bailey, which is very encouraging. Villa won this 1-0 early in the season. They've got a lot of injuries though. Diego Carlos, McGinn, Augustinsson, all out. Dendonker's suspended. Southampton have Bella Kotchap, Larius, Walcott and Livramento out. And I think Villa will repeat their earlier score and win 1-0.
Absolutely love it, Jonathan. Villa have won both away games under Emery since he's come in, but I think this one will be 1-1. Ben?
I think Villa will edge at 1-0 as well.
Love the confidence. Love those predictions. Ben, you've got West Ham against Everton.
Yeah, two teams on dire runs of form clash at the London Stadium on Saturday afternoon as West Ham host Everton. Pair have failed to win in 7, the longest active winless runs in the Premier League, and are stuck in the relegation zone on 15 points apiece. The Hammers have lost 3 on the bounce on home turf. Understandably, the West Ham faithful are starting to run out of patience with head coach David Moyes. He'll aim to correct the Hammers' poor run of form without Maxwell Cornet, though Alfonso Areola will be assessed and could be fit to make the squad. However, he is unlikely to take Lucas Fabianski's spot between the sticks. An inability to regularly hit the back of the net is proving to be West Ham's downfall. Only Wolves have actually scored fewer league goals this season than the Hammers, with East London side seeking to correct these goal woes with the potential addition of Terem Moffi from Lorient, the Nigerian striker having scored 12 league goals this season. Everton suffered a huge blow in their bid to beat the drop as they fell to a 2-1 home loss to relegation rival Southampton, and the fans voiced their discontent after the defeat as the videos on social media show. Like West Ham, a lack of goals is harming the Toffees' chances of consolidating their top-flight spot, with Everton, like West Ham, having scored 15 league goals this season. Frank Lampard has 4 players out due to injury here, with Nathan Patterson, James Garner, Andros Townsend, and Michael Keane all sidelined. Everton do have an okay record at the London Stadium, but what is likely to be the footballing equivalent of 2 bold men fighting over a comb, I would back West Ham to use home advantage and secure all spoils here. And I'm backing West Ham to edge this one 1-0.
I'm going to go 0-0. Jonathan?
Also 1-0 to West Ham.
1-0 to West Ham. Ben, yellow card. That was well over a minute. Come on. You know the word yellow card there. It's the just a minute section. Yep, Bournemouth v Forest for you, Jonathan.
Forest in a nice run of form at the moment. They've got to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup. They've only lost 1 of their last 6. Their win at Southampton on January the 4th was their first away from home this season. That was only their second away goal this season. They're now to 13th in the table, which seems incredible. And they could climb to 12th, depending what happens with Palace against United and against Newcastle. But this is a real chance to consolidate that move away from the bottom 3 against the Bournemouth side, who seem to be sinking pretty quickly. The game early in the season was that game where Forest were 2-0 up at half-time at the City Ground. Bournemouth came back in the second half, won it 3-2, which was right in the middle of the Gary O'Neill sort of golden spell. They got him a job. But they've now lost 6 games in a row. They've lost 10 of the last 12 games, and the only 2 that they haven't lost have both been wins against Frank Lampard's Everton, which only just counts. Forest got 9 players out, including Henderson, Lingard, and Kiate. Bournemouth have got 7 out, of whom Lewis Cook and the suspended Adam Smith and Solanke are probably the 2 big ones. I'm going to go 1-1 here.
I'm going to go 3-1 to Forest. Ben?
2-1 to Forest.
2-1 to Forest. Jonathan, yellow card for you as well. That was over a minute.
67 seconds away.
Over a minute is over a minute, Jonathan. The rules are there for a reason. Leicester v Brighton, Ben.
Leicester's post-World Cup slump continued at the weekend as they fell to a 2-0 defeat at Midlands rivals Nottingham Forest. The Foxes have lost their last 4 league matches and now just 2 points above the relegation zone. Brendan Rodgers has watched on as his side have scored just 1 league goal in the last 4 matches as his struggles come to the fore once more. The Foxes welcome in-form Brighton to the King Power Stadium on Saturday, and Rodgers must do so without 5 confirmed absentees. However, Rodgers may welcome back 3 key attacking players in Ozzy Perez, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, and crucially James Maddison, as Leicester look to sort their goal issues. One team without such problems in front of goal is Brighton. Since Roberto De Zerbi took charge of the Seagulls back in mid-September, they've scored 24 league goals, which at the time of recording, is behind only Arsenal and Newcastle with 28 and 25 respectively. Brighton smashed Liverpool 3-0 at the Amex on Saturday, and they now sit just 1 point outside the top 6. They have no major injury concerns, with Jakob Murder a long-term absentee. Landro Trossard is set to leave the club this month, but with Solly March, Evan Ferguson and Karol Mitoma in flying form, the Belgians' absence isn't a huge loss. Brighton are winless in 7 at the King Power, but have one of the best away records in the Premier League, and they are good value to land a 4th successive away league win, which I'm backing to do so to win 3-1.
Just about a minute there. Could have been a potential red card offence. Jonathan, your prediction?
2-1 to Brighton.
I'm going to go 3-0 to Brighton. Successive 3-0s for Brighton and Hove Albion. Jonathan, you finished with the Johan Kabay derby, Palace against Newcastle. The
Palace had won 5 of 6 before the United game lost 5 of 6 before the United game on Wednesday. They're still 12th on the table, 7 points above the relegation zone, but they will, I think, be starting to look a little bit anxiously over their shoulders. Newcastle are up to 3rd. They still haven't lost in the league since August. The Sheffield Wednesday defeat in the Cup did perhaps raise doubts about their strength in depth. They got a big doubt over Guimaraes, who turned his ankle against Fulham on Sunday. They can bring Joelinton back into midfield and play Sam Maxon on the left. But they're also without Kraft, Target, and Shelvey. MacArthur, Anderson, and Ferguson are all out for Palace. When they met early in the season at St James's Park, it finished 0-0, which is one of 5 goalless draws for Newcastle this season. Newcastle do have the best defensive record in the league, and I think they will continue that with a clean sheet here and win by a single goal, 2-0.
Yep, I've gone 2-0 as well, Ben.
2-0 to Newcastle.
Right, then, Ben,
okay. Could you just show my timing there?
Well, that's over is over, Jonathan, but I can't send you off when the game's finished. Oh, no, I can, and then you'd be banned for next week, but I'm not going to do that because we don't.
It's only the FA Cup, don't care.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're doing a show either, so, it doesn't matter if you sit with that one out when we're not doing a show. Ben, Leeds v Brentford, walking the tightrope you are. Your minute starts now.
A 2-1 loss at Aston Villa last week extended Leeds' winless run to 5 games, and such a poor streak has seen them drop to within 2 points of the relegation zone. Since an impressive 3-0 win over Chelsea back in August, Leeds have won just one of the last 7 in the league at Elland Road, and they need to correct their home form in order to keep their heads above water. They signed young French forward Jorginho Rutter from Hoffenheim earlier this week, and while he scored just 2 league goals, the tricky 20-year-old has completed more dribbles than any other player in the Bundesliga this season. He'll hope to make his Premier League debut against Brentford, but Jesse Marsh is without Crescencio, Somerville, Archie Gray and Stuart Dallas. Liam Cooper and Lewis Sinisterra may return from injury against Cardiff when they play in the FA Cup tonight, or Adam Forshaw could feature at the weekend. Brighton extended their unbeaten run to 7 games last time out, so they eased past Bournemouth at the G-Tech Community Stadium. The Bees have now won 4 of their last 5 and begin to look up rather than down the table. Thomas Frank is hoping to have Shandon, Baptiste and Rico Henry available for Sunday's trip to Elland Road, but Frank Onyeka, Aaron Hickey and Thomas Strakosha miss out. The Bees won the reverse fixture 5-2 back in September, but have failed to win their last 6 trips to Leeds. With a solid away record, Brentford will feel confident returning to the capital, all 3 points in tow. But Elland Road will likely provide a hostile atmosphere for Frank's side, with a rivalry developing between the pair in recent years. I think this one will end 2-2.
Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. I'm going to go 2-2 as well. And Ben, it's a red card. 10 seconds over. I can't let that go. No one would ever respect me ever again if I let that go. Red card. We'll sort out a punishment for the next show. Unbelievable scenes in the Just a Minute section. A red card. I've never had to do that before. You should be ashamed of yourself, Ben.
Oh, I'll be replaced next time out, don't worry.
that does us for this week's iteration of Edge of the Box. Thanks ever so much to Jonathan and Ben for joining me, and thanks for watching as well. Thanks to Sam from BetVictor and to BetVictor for continuing their sponsorship with us. We'll be back the next time there's Premier League games of the week after the FA Cup round of fixtures. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on and you'll know exactly when the show is coming. Only one thing left to say, stay safe.